ask someone like, what are you looking for in a relationship, it'll tend to be quite generic. They'll be like, I want someone who's kind, I want someone who's funny, I want someone who's smart. And everyone says that. Like, no one wants to be with an unkind, dumb, and
I said that yesterday.
You did say that yesterday, but like, I think that's normal. I've said that. But actually, those are just like very generic baseline qualities. What is the thing your soul is actually wanting to experience through a relationship? You need to get clear on that so that you can then, when you go out into the world and you're encountering people, whether you're actively dating or not, you have this a very clear kind of like internal guidance. So I think it's really just about getting to know yourself. If you get right down to it, getting to know yourself, and also growing your belief that I can have that does exist, and I'm not asking for too much.
Hello and welcome to my channel Interior Reflections, the self-empowerment series. I'm here today with one of my closest and dearest friends, Kat, founder of Free Souls United. We are going to be talking about maybe my favorite theme in the world, which is love and relationships, finding your soul connection as opposed to a partner that's just good enough. What you think makes the difference between a soul connection and someone who is, just good enough, or just a kind of mediocre relationship?
So I think my theory is that our souls are always trying to bring us closer to that person who is going to be the right match for us, and with whom we can actually grow together and evolve to our fullest level.
So specifically to you and your partner, how close was what you had in your head to what when you met? Was it kind of like, because for me, I have this sense of like, sometimes the thing you want is not the thing you get, but it's actually the thing you need, or that you've been calling in on a deeper level. But so I wonder, in your experience, how close was kind of like this ideal that you had in your head to the person you then met?
Well, that's the thing. I think it's interesting. It's like, it's not even an ideal. Like, maybe you can just say that's a matter of semantics, but it's not an ideal that you're wanting to attract and call into your life. It's simply an energetic match.
Was there a point with you and your partner when you kind of had this light bulb moment that this could be it, or was it more just very much a flowing thing, that one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and it was just kind of a logical next step sort of process?
Yeah, I think it's like an unfolding, right? Because I think it's so much about like connecting with your intuition in the moment. And it's so important, because I would always do this before. It's so important not to project into the future. Don't even project, a month into the future, let alone years into the future. Because that's really what keeps you grounded. And that in that way you can see like, okay, how is this person showing up right now? You're not looking at their potential, but you're looking at like, how are they showing up through their actions? Is it consistent? Is it resonating with me? So I think for me it was definitely like an unfolding where this feels right, it's continuing to feel right. I feel like it's growing, and it's just very natural in that sense, rather than there being one moment where you're like rather there being one moment where it's like, this is it, this person is the one. I think that can kind of be restrictive in a sense, because you know I've seen like with friends when they meet someone and there's like, you know, you meet a person and there's this intense physical attraction, or there's some kind of like intense emotional connection, and you really like just you are so how can I say, you're so captivated by that. You become so captivated, invested in that. But then perhaps that person starts showing up in an inconsistent way, or you know, they're not actually fully present. They're not giving you their full self, but you're still kind of stuck on this image of like, oh, but they were showing up in this way before, and it just turns into something like dysfunctional and something that is not aligned with you.
Talk to me about, when you say equality, what do you mean? Do you mean like spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, appearance wise, all of those together? Or is there like, you know, three most important ones? Or do you mean essence? Like, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think I just mean like all the things that are important to you. And what I notice happens sometimes is we think like, I had a friend who was like, I don't have any physical type. Like, I don't care what the person looks like. I'll date anybody, which kind of like, it sounds nice in theory, I guess. But uh, when you dig a little bit deeper, it was just her feeling like she didn't, I guess she wasn't entitled to have a physical type, because it would make her shallow, it would make her kind of superficial in some way. And you know, we do that with all sorts of things, like we kind of tell ourselves, you know, I'm just not being judgmental, or I'm being open minded. I'm, you know, just, yeah, keeping an open mind. But a lot of the time, you just end up compromising yourself. And yeah, so I think it's just about being really honest with yourself about how does this feel? Like, you know, how does it feel in my body? Because when you are compromising on something that is important to you, there is this inner resistance that's happening on the inside. Your intuition is, you know, giving you the signal that this isn't right. You know, like there is some kind of disconnect or inner conflict. And I know that happened with me so many times where, yeah, I'd zero in on the quality that they had, or the quality, you know, that I connected with in that person, and I'd try and push away the important quality that they lacked, the way that we were completely misaligned. So just note, I think it's important to notice when you are dating or when you are in a relationship, like, am I actually ignoring certain facets and kind of telling myself that's not important, or I can't even expect that, and just overly focusing in on other things. Like, you know, I've seen this where you're dating someone who perhaps they appear outwardly kind of successful, like they have a good job, maybe they're physically attractive, you know, they're as educated as you are, but emotionally they're really stunted, and you know, they're unable to kind of, you're doing all the emotional work, they're not meeting you halfway, and uh, people can become so fixated on kind of perhaps the external image of like, oh, we look so good together, or you know, this person socially is like in social status, they're my equal, but you know, the emotional element is lacking, and vice versa, you know. So I think just noticing, what am I overly fixating on, and what am I trying to ignore or push aside? What do you think about that?
I think it's I think for me to like bring it down to like a very, very simple terms, and I said this to a friend once, I feel like both parties genuinely need to feel like they've won.
Yeah.
You know, you need to, it's like, and if you compare it to something very simple like finding your, you know, an apartment that you want or a job that you want, there needs to be that sense of like, this is right, you know, and without like going into certain areas, overall this needs to be like, this needs to feel right on a very simple level.
Yeah.
You know, if you find yourself like justifying at all why something is or isn't, I think that's like a clear sign of, you know, if your mind is having to compensate for the feelings that you're having or not having, I think that's a pretty clear sign that there's something not quite right there.
I agree. As soon as your mind steps in, and as soon as you start with the rationalizations and, you know, the justifications, that's just showing that you're trying to override your intuition and, you know, impose how you would like things to be rather than how things are and how you're actually feeling. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
To what extent do you think you need to be realized within yourself to meet that soul partner? To what you know, how much, you know, there is this, you know, Esther Perel we both listen to, and she's actually really against this whole idea of people needing to do self-work, because she argues that you can only do relationship work within the context of a relationship. You can't actually do relationship work on your own. And so, like, in your experience or in your view, to what extent do you need to do the self-work before you're actually even able to attract the right partner?
It's such a good topic. Like, that in itself could, you know, is such a thing that you can dive into. But I think it's nuanced. I think it's both. You're going to have certain experiences in a relationship that are going to help you evolve your communication skills, you know, your the way you respond to conflicts, and there is so much growth and evolution that happens within the context of a relationship. So thinking that, you know, if in order to attract the right person or the right relationship, I need to be like fully realized, fully healed, fully integrated. That's kind of like a perfectionism trap that you set for yourself, because you're never going to get there. That's a lifelong thing. So I agree with Asta Perel in that sense, but I do also think there is an element of self-work that we can do in order to make better choices and to attract in things that people that are more aligned with us, people that speak more to you know, to our souls rather than to our wounded ego self. And you know, that can be, there's so many ways we can do that in a work, but I think it all just boils down to being honest with yourself, like not avoiding or looking away from the parts of you that do feel unworthy, or do feel you know, do feel like undeserving, or whatever it may be, and just being fully honest with yourself and starting to accept all the parts of you, because what happens is, if there are important parts of yourself that you reject, you're going to attract in people who are going to magnify those parts of you. So for example, if you feel like okay, what can I say? If you feel like
you're suppressing your artistic side.
Okay, say you're suppressing your artistic, free-spirited side, you're going to attract in perhaps a person who is an embodiment of that suppressed side. They're artistic and they're living the kind of life that you want.
And you'll be wildly attracted to them.
You will be wildly attracted to them, but then you're going to face some kind of rejection or heartbreak or disillusionment. And that's all happening in order for you to connect back with that side of yourself that you've been rejecting, to integrate it into your being. And same thing, you know, like say you feel unworthy in some way, like I feel unworthy of a real connection, of real commitment, then you're going to keep attracting in emotionally unavailable people who, you know, give you the promise of something and kind of like give you some breadcrumbs that lure you in, only to realize like, oh, this isn't going anywhere. And again, you end up feeling rejected, there's the heartbreak, but all of that is happening so that you will actually take that part that you've been rejecting or you've felt unworthiness around and bring acceptance and love to that part of yourself. Bring yourself back into wholeness. Um, so in that sense, the inner work is really important, because by doing the inner work, you're not going to be settling for the same kind of situations that you have been, and you're going to be attracting in higher quality people and dynamics.
Yeah. And if you're someone who's not found your partner yet, that intimate partner, to what extent can we actually, and we talk about this a lot, kind of practice in our other relationships, not, you know, being around people who truly bring out our better self rather than our kind of ego self, our petty child version, more of our higher self that knows that broader perspective, that better part of us. You know, there's that concept that we all have the bad wolf and the good wolf, and which one do we feed? In theory, if we surround ourselves by people who are always feeding the good wolf, who are seeing the better part of us, the higher part of us, the more expanded, the more mature, the more, you know, decent part of us, then in theory, we're going to be able to quicker recognize those people that don't bring that out and immediately be quicker to reject that. So I feel like we can kind of practice that in our other relationships. And that's a way that we can kind of up level in our friendships, in the people we give our time to, and therefore recognize that partner, you know, when we realize that they are seeing the best in us. And I think that is a phrase that's thrown around a bit, you know, this person brings out the best in me. And sometimes that term can be a little bit fluffy because it kind of negates the work that we ourselves need to do. But we had this amazing conversation where you were saying that you and your partner had a disagreement, and it was like it was an automatic thing that the more mature, the higher version of yourself was called forward to face that situation, rather than, you know, the ego part of you, which is like defensive, kind of resentful, petty. They just want to kind of like get the last word in. They just want to win the argument. And I remember saying to you, because I had this moment of epiphany, and I was like, maybe that is one of the core ways to know whether somebody's right for you. And in terms of like other relationships as well, friends, does that relationship call for you to be your better self, even in times of conflict, or does it actually inspire like the psycho part of you, which is like wounded and, you know, so yeah, talk to me about like that side of things in terms of, you know, to what extent is that like a good sign to know whether someone is that person for you?
I have a theory around it, and my theory is that, get ready, when we each have a person, or perhaps a few people in our lifetimes, with whom we're, you know, meant to be in an intimate relationship with, and who is going to evolve us to our, you can say the highest level, but I just like to think like the fullest level, the, you know, the happiest, most peaceful, most embodied version of ourselves. Whether you call that your soulmate or whatever, it doesn't matter. But there is that person, or perhaps multiple people. So our soul has, I guess you could say, an intention or an agenda for us to meet that person and to be in a relationship with that person. And of course, we get in our own way and choose the people who are actually, as you say, catering more to our ego self, our small self. So I think when we do encounter the person slash people with who we are meant to grow and evolve with, it's like our soul works to bring forth that higher version of ourselves, the one that is able to, in a disagreement, communicate in a kind and clear way, as opposed to, saying hurtful things and attacking the other person. It's just easier for that side to come forth because it's a part of, I guess, the higher design that our soul has for our life. Our soul doesn't want us to, for that relationship to be sabotaged and to fall apart if it is the right relationship, the one that's bringing forth our happiest, fullest, most peaceful version of self. Which is why, on the reverse side, when you are with a person who you're not meant to be with, but for whatever reason you're like clinging to, whether it's a trauma bond or someone you're settling for because you feel like, I can't do any better, it's like that smaller self comes out in arguments or, in everyday life. Because they're not actually a part of your soul design, and your soul is wanting you to get out of that relationship. There might be nothing wrong with that person. They can be perfectly lovely as a human, but they're not for you. You two are not meant to be together and do life together, which is why the smaller self keeps coming out. So that makes sense.
That made perfect sense. And in my own way of explaining it, it's like if your ego is constantly coming out, or the smaller part of you, or the frustrated, resentful part of you is constantly coming out, that part of you is there to defend something. It's there to control something. And if you're having to defend and control the relationship, then that immediately indicates that the relationship would not actually function on its own. Something needs to be controlled, something needs to be manipulated for it to actually be alive.
Yes.
And the minute that ego steps back and that higher self takes over, and usually the relationship will disintegrate naturally.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to defend it or control it or to actually keep it in place.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, I guess, in so many circumstances, when people are with someone who's wrong for them and then they start to do the self-work, the relationship just very naturally disintegrates, because it's like the minute you're in touch with your blueprint, with your soul's purpose, with getting close to the person you're actually supposed to be with, suddenly this relationship just disintegrates because the ego's gone and there's nothing to defend it back into place.
It to stand on.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think that's a big one. So if anyone's like in a relationship that they're not sure, I think one of the big things with relationships is like that thing of, I'm driving down the wrong road. I've taken the wrong turn with someone, and it's 15 years down the line. And someone's called you up and someone's told you millions of times, that's yourself telling you that you've taken the wrong road and you need to turn back. But you're like, I've been driving down this road for so long, it's too late to turn back. So instead of turning back, you actually keep going down that wrong road. Yeah. So yeah, it's I feel like if you don't correct that, it bleeds into all other areas of your life. And
because you're basically living in a state of inner conflict. There's a state of inner resistance where, as you say, your soul or your intuition is trying to move you in a certain direction, but your ego self, or your kind of your rational minds, is trying to justify the relationship that you're in. And so you're living in this state of disharmony or inner conflict. And of course that's going to affect all areas of your life, because our lives aren't these discrete categories of this is work and this is my friendships and this is my romantic relationship. No, that only exists in your minds. They all kind of the energy is the one and the same. So yeah, oftentimes, you know, if you are in the wrong relationship, then you're going to notice that your career is also or affected, or you know, money feels hard. It's all a reflection of your inner state.
Yeah, of like a fractured state.
Fractured state, yeah.
Do you think, from your perspective, that relationships are work? Because I think there is like for me it's confusing, because I watch so many podcasts about this, and so many people say that yes, it's definitely work. Like for example, I read the latest book by Jay Shetty, who's like, yes, this is you know, a relationship requires work, just like everything else. You know, you wouldn't not like water your garden for a month and then expect it to bear fruit. And then of course this can be like kind of this can also be taken and put in the context of a relationship with the wrong person, because you could argue that, okay, of course it's work, you know, sometimes you're going to be frustrated, sometimes you're going to be fighting, the whole thing is going to be on some level work. What is the distinction between work in a soul-connected relationship versus work in a relationship with the person that's good enough?
So I think, like, on the basic level, when you are with the right person and in the right relationship, there's like this underlying sense of ease and flow, and I don't want to say effortlessness, but there is something about it that...
Would you say safety?
Safety, yeah, safety and ease. That is always there, even when the most challenging, you know, more challenging times come up. It's like, I think you always kind of feel this underlying sense of coherence, an underlying sense of like, I'm not having to convince myself of something, because as we touched upon, it's, you're not fractured. There isn't this inner conflict between you ignoring your
you're not compromising yourself, yes, in a very big way. Why do you think relationships are so difficult? Why do you think as a species in general we just struggle with this so much? You know, you either see people who are struggling to find love, or they're in a relationship but they're not having a very good time. Like, why do you think this is such a massive struggle?
I think like every relationship, including, you know, your romantic relationship, is of course a mirror for your relationship with your own self. There's like no way of getting around that. And even when you are with the right person, even when, you know, things are mostly like easy and flowing, you're still going to get triggered. You're still going to encounter times where, you know, these strong, heavy emotions come up, because you're being mirrored a part of yourself that you haven't fully accepted, that still feels, you know, uncomfortable and raw. So I think the reason that, you know, romantic relationships are such a huge kind of such an area of like struggle or confusion for a lot of people, myself included, for like most of my life, is because we don't have the right relationship with our own selves. And when I say right relationship, what I mean is we don't have a relationship with ourselves where we're owning who we are completely, where we're fully accepting and loving of who we are, not just the parts of ourselves that other people like and that we think will get approval and will give us connection, but also the parts of us that, you know, might feel too big, or might feel not enough, or might feel like just harder to accept and integrate. So I think, simply said, the more that we improve our relationship with our own selves, meaning just coming back into who we are and really owning it, the more that our external relationships will just feel easier, and it just won't be this huge uphill struggle.
I definitely think that is most like when you look at when I personally have a lot of like functional other relationships, but I think that an intimate relationship, as you pointed out, I think that is the one that is so closely such a clear reflection of all parts, because that is the person that you show everything to, perhaps even more so than you show your family or friends. You really show that person everything, because that is what's required to build true intimacy in a romantic relationship. And then with family, you are a daughter, you are a sister, so you can stay within that kind of contained um, I guess, show that side of yourself and know how to be a good daughter or a good. But in the context of a romantic relationship, it just takes a lot more transparency, and it actually requires you to really, really, really reconnect and make friends with all parts of yourself, which is the thing that is most, I guess, hardest to do. It really requires you to integrate all parts of yourself, which other relationships just don't have that requirement, which is maybe why they're so much easier.
You can hide more in other relationships, right?
Exactly.
Like with your friends,
and it's perfectly acceptable to do so.
Yeah. And you're not, seeing that other person. You're not living with a friend perhaps, or with a family member. You're not seeing them all the time, so you can kind of you can keep yourself in check in a way. You can keep those unflattering parts of yourself kind of under wraps, whereas with your partner, it's like it all comes out. It just naturally does, and that's when you have to deal with that side of you that's like, wow, I didn't realize I could be that overreactive or whatever it is, and really just having to I guess sit with yourself and start to accept all facets of your being. Yeah.
And I love that, because that really does tie back into the importance of self-work, and really how important that is in actually manifesting the right person and being okay with, at the very least, with those different parts of you, and not hiding from yourself and not being dishonest with yourself.
And I have to touch upon that. If you feel like you keep attracting the same kind of people or dynamics in your dating or love life, this is just like a very simple thing you can do. Simple, but it can be kind of challenging, that you can do to start to accept and integrate all the parts of yourself. And that is, notice what you bring forth when you're on a first date, for example. So, for me, what I was bringing forth a lot of the time was like my very charming side that was, very like cool, the cool girl in a sense, which,
we all love the cool girl. She doesn't get pissed off.
She doesn't really have the messy emotions. She's the cool girl. So I noticed that was what I was bringing forth. And then what you can do is kind of bring the opposite of that forth. Just introduce the opposite energy, in the sense of what I did was I started to, I guess, talk a little bit more about my emotions. Obviously I didn't go all in, but I just started to, I guess, even use language that was a bit more like emotionally centered. That was the opposite of the persona that I had been playing out in dating. And what that meant was I stopped kind of attracting the same patterns or dynamics, because I was bringing forth a different energy. I was bringing forth the suppressed energy in myself. So, for example, if your thing is like you're the hopeless romantic and you get like swept up when you're dating, bring forth the more like grounded and more practical side of you that you perhaps haven't nurtured or cultivated enough. If your thing is like if your thing is the cool girl, perhaps you bring forward more of like your your real self, the part of you that is just a bit more like messy and a bit more not super flattering in a sense.
But it really means just like bring your whole self, doesn't it?
Bring your whole self.
Bring your whole self. Like
totally.
You watch certain people, I think the most charismatic people are the people who bring them their whole self, because essentially it's going to be layered, it's going to be multifaceted, it's going to be quite complex, but you know, you're embodying your whole self.
So, and just give yourself that permission, you know. It's really liberating, and you stop caring about how the other person responds to it and just start accepting that the right people are going to resonate with your whole self, and the people who aren't right are just going to fall away.
So before we finish up, Kat, I want you to talk a little bit about your love manifestation course and how it can help people, but also if you could give us, you know, someone who's out there dating or perhaps in looking for the right person, for the soul connection, not just the person that's good enough. What are 3 things that they could be doing, you know, or what they should perhaps stop doing during this process to give them the best chance of manifesting this in the shortest span of time?
Yeah, I think, the course you touch upon is the energetics of love and partnerships, which is a workshop I created that combines, you know, energetics, self-inquiry, and breath work to help you get into that place where you are going to draw in the right thing as quickly and efficiently as possible, I guess. But I think the first thing you can do is literally just start getting curious, just start noticing, try and be like completely neutral with yourself and notice like what are the patterns that keep popping up in my life, you know. Even you can sometimes be dating people who seem very different, but there's like the way that it plays out is the same. So what are the similarities that you can see in your love life and your dating life? So literally like write it down.
I think it's also great if you're out there dating all the time, it's also fun to observe that if you are in the middle of dating and you tweak something, watch the outcome change.
Totally.
I think that's really interesting. As you kind of like up level, your experience will reflect that as well.
And I think that goes to show that the inner work isn't just about you sitting there and, you know, like writing in your journal. Like, yes, of course, that's a part of it, the, you know, kind of like reflective, contemplative side. But it's also about how you're interacting in the world and with people, and kind of using it as an experiment to, you know, to bring yourself into a more like aligned, self-empowered, deserving version of self. So
and be playful about
it, because, you know, it doesn't have to be super serious. Like, I think just remembering at the end of the day, when you are your true self, like when you are embodying all of your being, then you are going to attract the person who is just so irresistibly drawn to that, and you're going to be so irresistibly drawn to their full embodiments. And just kind of remembering it's like it's inevitable, you know, like you don't have to force or manipulate or, you know, push anything. It will happen if you just keep showing up as your true self. And that's what I would say.
I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. This has been just basically me and Kat letting you in on one of our very lengthy conversations. So yeah, thank you for watching, and looking forward to seeing you in the next one.